So SMSL H400 is a mid-range SMSL headphone amplifier that goes for $499 US. And this is like a really well-built product, as you would expect from SMSL lately. It's made out of aluminum. I have a silver version here. There is also black option. And given that this is a headphone amplifier, it's quite simple when it comes to features. So you can see that in the back we have both single-ended and XLR inputs, analog inputs, because there is no DAC inside, so no digital inputs, just a headphone amplifier. Then we have single-ended and XLR analog outputs, because this headphone amp can also be used as a small preamp. And in the front you can see three different headphone outputs. Both single-ended and balanced are on board. Given that this is a truly balanced design, balanced output actually has more power and it does sound better, but we'll talk about that in the sound section. Talking about the power, this is a powerhouse. It can go up to 12 watts. Of course, in ideal situation, that's the maximum power it can provide. I'll put that on the screen, some more info if you want to see. But it's safe to say that for like 99.9% of headphones out there on the market, this will be plenty of power. Also, H400 features this new UI. It's slightly redesigned and, in my opinion, better and more modern looking UI. But once again, given that this is a headphone amplifier, you don't have much to tinker with really. You can select inputs and outputs and one of three different gains, and you can of course adjust volume. That's it. There is not much more to talk about. If you really like to see numbers and total harmonic distortions and dynamic ranges and things like that, you can always open SMSL's website about this product and see like a long spec sheet. Numbers are great, by the way. They usually are with all good products nowadays. But let's talk about how does it really sound. I still owe you that difference between the sound on single-ended output and balanced output. And it is noticeable. While on single-ended out, this SMSL sounds perfectly fine, everything is there, the balance is good, it's tonally neutral and it sounds quite dynamic and alive. Once you move to balanced output, you'll notice that there is just greater clarity and greater instrument separation. And the sound stage feels wider, bigger, airier, with more empty space between each individual tone. And everything just feels decluttered and more open and airy and breezy. So if you can, I strongly suggest to use balanced output. And if you have headphones with detachable cables, but you do not own a balanced one, and you buy this amp, I strongly suggest to invest a bit more to get that balanced cable, because that way you would enjoy improvement in fidelity. And I just think it would be pity to buy something that sounds this good and then just leave some performance on the table because you do not have the best possible cable for the best possible connection. Once that's out of the way, what you can expect from H400 is sound that when listened in isolation, it sounds perfectly good, it's neutral, and it has plenty of details throughout the frequency spectrum. Now the bass line is quick, it's nimble, it's very resolving, but it's not super lightweight or anything like that. There's enough mass there, there's enough authority to enjoy like any pop or electronic music or whatever. And above that bass line, mid-range and highs sound open, revealing, but long gone are days where these devices sounded like edgy or sharp. Now this sounds really pleasant and open and revealing, but in a natural kind of way, with good tone timbre, with like healthy tone fullness and body and everything. And I probably don't mention this enough because I review many devices, and I know that for some time now it's the case with SMSL devices and also most topping devices. But if you haven't been on the market or just following what's going on for the last few years, you might expect analytically detailed but slightly edgy and sharp kind of sound from this class of device coming from China, but that's not the case. They matured so much. So really good, natural, healthy tonality. Now moving on to the sound stage, as I said, on balanced output, sound stage really sounds wide. It has plenty of room around instruments. They have space to breathe and sound decluttered and well separated. And the dynamics is also good. This is one engaging, lively sounding amplifier. Now that's another story. Like several years ago, revealing amplifier could sound dynamically flat and a bit boring, but that's not the case anymore. This is an engaging, dynamically alive sounding amplifier. But listening to something in isolation doesn't tell us how it stands in the current market and how it fares against the competition. So for that, I first compared it with Topping A70 Pro, and this one is priced at the exact same $499. It's quite a popular headphone amp. It's also a powerhouse. On paper it's even slightly more powerful, but in reality I do not notice the difference between 12 and 17 watts. Aside from pricing, they also share the same set of features and functionalities. And basically the only thing that sets them apart, aside from looks of course and the brand, is how they sound. So let's talk about that. Here we have bass line that is weightier and it feels like punches a bit harder. SMSL, in a direct comparison, sounds just a touch light-footed in the bass region, even though in absolute terms, listening to it on its own, SMSL does not sound lean or like it's lacking bass, but A70 Pro is bassier one, and SMSL is slightly quicker, more nimble, but with less weight and less grunt in the bassline. Then moving to the mid-range, I feel that both of these are quite equally revealing. There is just not enough difference to talk about there. And in the highest region, SMSL feels a bit more engaging. It's a bit more alive and sparkly sounding. So things like cymbals or some guitar string plucks will sound a bit livelier and more alive and just more sparkly up top with SMSL, and a bit darker, tamer and more laid back with Topping. So generally speaking, I feel that both of these amps belong to the same tier. They have quite equally good performance, but with different flavorings. Once again, subjectively to my ears, I do feel that SMSL is a bit more neutral, whereas Topping is a bit more bassy and slightly warmer sounding. I think Topping will appeal to bass heads, electronic music lovers, like modern pop music enjoyers, where SMSL will probably be slightly more appealing to those of you who listen to lots of music genres with acoustic instruments, acoustic spaces with spatial cues and things like that, where a bit better extension in higher frequencies and livelier sound there gives touch more air and just spatial cues than Topping is capable of. Then my last comparison is with Geshelli E3. Now this is a slightly more expensive head amplifier at $550 US. And yeah, most would argue that it doesn't look as nice without a display and in casing and with a style that can remind a bit on some do-it-yourself projects and things like that. So one can argue that SMSL does look nicer and has this display and it's like finer looking device. Also, another functional thing to notice is that Geshelli E3 is a balanced amp that possess balanced inputs only and the balanced outputs only, unlike SMSL that also enables you to use single-ended inputs and outputs. Now, those functional and style differences aside, how do they compare in terms of the sound? Now, once again, like it was the case with Topping, we are talking about basically the same tier devices. And on the first listen, I noticed quite similar soundstage width and detail retrieval, and both sound very neutral. So you will not notice anything like one of these is very warm and bassy while the other one is oriented towards high frequencies and overly lean or something like that. They're both tonally mature, neutral sounding amps with good soundstage and good layering and separation. But if you're really critical, once you zoom in and listen to the music critically, especially with good recordings, you will notice that Geshelli E3 has slightly more revealing nature, and transients are crisper. And also one thing that is probably making the biggest difference for me personally, that E3 has more obvious and more easily noticeable tone trails. And there's that sensation that tone is lasting long in time. And this is not noticeable in some songs. Like if you listen to pop music mostly, you will probably not notice that. Rock and roll, pretty much the same thing. But if you listen to a lot of jazz, blues, any sort of acoustic music and things that are recorded either in like natural rooms that you can hear acoustics of those rooms and spatial cues, or if those are simply added in post-production through reverb and other effects, those will be more noticeable and more like liquid-like in time through Geshelli than through SMSL. By the way, at all times I'm talking about Geshelli Labs with its own default power supply, not upgraded, because that would improve the sound, but that would also leave the price to be comparable to more expensive SMSL amps. So my conclusion about this comparison is that if you do listen critically and good recordings, I do think that Geshelli is slightly more transparent and slightly better sounding amp. But as I said in the beginning, these are same tier devices, so that difference is not huge. It's not like, oh, you notice that immediately. You have to focus and to pay attention and know what you're listening for. So if by any chance you cannot get Geshelli in your market, or you simply don't like its look and styling, fear not, SMSL H400 is the same tier device, almost as good as Geshelli. This leads me to the conclusion. SMSL H400 is not some sort of device that brings new and unseen value on the market and disrupts the order of things by bringing up until now unseen performance at this price. But it actually performs really well for its price, and it goes head-to-head with a really good headphone amplifier like Topping A70 Pro. To me personally, it sounds even slightly better. It fights really well against Geshelli E3. If you like it for any reason more, may that be style or some functionality that it has, or it's simply more available in your market, feel free to go for it. It's a really, really good headphone amplifier. And with that, I hope you liked the video. See you next time.